Hello, masters and humans, I suppose, and welcome back to our weekly My Hero Academia Season 5 discussion video. Today we're here to talk all about Episode 20, My Villain Academia, and before we get into it, I do want to say that no matter what happens, no matter how we're feeling, let us remember one glorious thing. Johnny's finally here! On all seriousness, though, we are going to get into this week's discussion video, and as you know, I have been reading the manga as of late. I'm actually quite close to catching up, but you don't have to worry, I'm not going to be talking about manga spoilers here. This is still an anime-only zone. So, as we get into it, I want to quickly remind you to hit that like button if you have not done so already, and consider subscribing to see more future content from yours truly. With that said, let's go ahead and begin our discussion. Alright, so, as you did hear me say, this is going to be a manga spoiler-free zone. However, that doesn't mean that I am not going to openly air my grievances so that you anime-onlys might understand the issue that manga readers have come to complain about in regards to this particular season of My Hero. As I will say, I am now one of them. I am a manga fan, manga reader. I sincerely cannot believe it has come to this, and yet here we stand. However, I do have some issues that I need aired out, but the biggest thing I want to stress, this was a very good episode. I was genuinely surprised. There's things that are left out on the cutting room floor, some things that I do, want to voice my concern over, because I am slightly concerned about how we're going to be proceeding after this, but I think the episode itself was very good. Again, things left on the cutting room floor, things I am very concerned about moving forward, given the pacing. For certain characters as well. We'll get to read Destro in a moment. But, I do feel as though, there's things that I am concerned about, and I want to voice those. So I think this is, just nitpicky things at the beginning. Shigaraki, at the beginning of the episode, we see the doctor performing some sort of operation, on Shigaraki. Ooh, wonder what this could be. Not going to tell you, but I know what it is. Mwahaha. But there's some sort of operation being performed on Shigaraki. And it's nowhere near as grim as it is in the manga. In the manga, this operation is very grim. I put out a tweet showing, essentially because we do see this at the beginning of, or the end, rather, of last week's episode. And it is almost night and day. The anime is doing what they can, but given the time slot in which it is airing, there's certain things that they cannot show. And when it comes to Horikoshi's art, the man is very interested in his detail, right? So there's a lot of detail being missed in the anime. At this point, the anime to me is supplemental, right? It's more people are going to watch the anime than will read the manga, right? But I do feel as though you are missing out a lot of detail by not reading the manga. I was wrong. I was completely wrong. You are missing out some pretty interesting detail, and this Shigaraki scene in particular is no exception. The fact that, and this is a small nitpick, but it could balloon into something a bit more serious, right? The fact that Shigaraki is not laughing during the operation. He is screaming in agony, right? Now, this is, sort of innocuous, right? I'm sure some of you are like, oh, that's such a nitpick, right? Instead of Shigaraki laughing, he is screaming because the operation is painful. That one change actually changes Shigaraki's characterization in the anime as opposed to the manga. In the manga, Shigaraki is laughing. In the anime, he is screaming. I think you can kind of understand the difference, right? It's the difference between feeling the pain and being scared and tortured versus laughing through the pain, right? Which is the Shigaraki that we have come to sort of understand, both in the anime and the manga. So to change it makes it seem as though Shigaraki is in distress, right? And I don't know if I necessarily like that. That's just a small nitpicky thing, right? It's not a big deal, but it is something that, a slight change that I can see sort of irritating some. I didn't hate it. I just thought it was an interesting change, and I wanted to sort of clock that as oh, that was a weird change. And speaking of change, there is a slight change in the OP. The opening does change from My Hero Academia to My Villain Academia, which is the typical name for this arc. It's not actually called that, but that is you know, how people have come to know it is MVA, My Villain Academia. I believe the arc actually has a different name. I believe it's just the Meta Liberation Army versus the League of Villains, something like that, like the Meta Liberation Army arc or something like that. It's not actually My Villain Academia, but that is how it has become coined, because that is what the manga changes its title to for a little while, is My Villain Academia, because we're actually seeing the villains grow and evolve, right? This is the villains arc. But the OP doesn't change that much. It just sort of changes the title. It just goes from My Hero Academia to My Villain Academia, and you see Decay, Shigaraki's quirk, sort of shown through the title. And that's it. It's like they made a little PNG and they threw it on top, and that's it. And again, I need to stress this, that I love Man with a Mission. They are such geniuses when it comes to their music. And Merry Go Round is a great song. I think it's a brilliant song. But I do feel as though it's a bit of a bummer that this is the Man with a Mission song that My Hero got, because it just doesn't feel like it's packing. But like When My Devil Rises, I think would have been like a song akin to that from Man with a Mission would have been so killer for My Villain Academia. It would have been amazing. Unfortunately, we didn't get that. We get Merry Go Round, which is hilariously opens with "Whoa, whoa, it's all right, everything will be all right." Spoilers. No, but you know, like everyone knows that, yeah, things are gonna get dark as we go, especially in this particular arc. It's the villain arc. Things are gonna get very dark. But yeah, it's a very the opening change. Like, as I'm sure people will be like, oh look, they changed it. You know, Bones, they like the villains. No, I'm not really feeling that. And Gigantomachia doesn't feel as big. There's no big intro for Redestro. Because if I'm recalling correctly, they'll put it in later, but Redestro actually gets I'm not going to say what it is, of course, but he gets an introduction before this, which I loved. I think it properly introduces you to who the character is, instead of this where he's just sort of thrown in your face. And Redestro as a character is going to be very interesting, and I want you all to keep an eye on him. But it's a bit of a shame. But I will say that if you take that out, if I take the manga glasses off, I do think that the flow so far is good. I think that we're moving at a good clip. I think everything is moving at a decent pace. I don't know. I don't know what I wanted. I know what I wanted. I just wanted the manga's pacing. But obviously, you know, you can't just one-to-one translate it. You know, that doesn't work. A good series composer, being a series head writer, when adapting a manga, knows how to take the manga's material, knows what to leave on the cutting room floor and what to adapt. And I feel like this season, series composition sort of dropped the ball. I think there's a lot of things that are being left on the cutting room floor that I don't think should be left on the cutting room floor. A lot of issues that I'm having. That said, I think they would need at least 5 to 6 more episodes to tell MVA's story, which is good, because there's about 5 left. That would leave enough time, I feel, for certain big moments to get certain characters to get individual episodes, and certain moments to get enough wiggle room and breathing room in order to properly let those moments feel fleshed out. Because MVA, I will say, is very much the manga fans were right. Like, this arc really does pack a lot in, and it is critical for My Hero's story going forward. This is the turning point, so it sort of boggles the mind that they would rather focus on the Endeavor stuff, and that the Endeavor stuff takes up a majority of the opening, when, to be quite honest, it's not any sort of turning point. It's a turning point for Endeavor and Todoroki, and it has, you know, fallout later, but the big turning point rather, is this. This is the big moment. So I just hope that Bones knows what they're doing, and I certainly hope they stick the landing. I don't know. I am sort of... I was hoping to be put at ease this week, and some of that is true. I do think the fight with Gigantomachia was a bit of a letdown, as you're not really... If you're anime only, you don't understand the sheer fear that Gigantomachia is meant to infer to you. He is supposed to be a freak of nature. Like, Gigantomachia is supposed to put the fear of God in you, you know? And I don't feel like they did that. It's cool that we get to see Shigaraki, you know, go toe-to-toe with Gigantomachia and everything. And the League of Villains, you know, like, combating Gigantomachia, but I don't feel as though the anime fully conveyed, at least not yet, the intensity of Gigantomachia. Like, this, you will understand. You will come to understand, I assume, because again, it is Bones. And I want to stress that Bones has not really let me down. This season did make me read the manga, which is not something that, you know, I normally do. But My Hero's manga was amazing, and I've been thoroughly enjoying myself. So I guess it's not a bad thing. But I trust Bones. There's 5 episodes left. I personally feel, as a rookie manga fan, as like a rookie to the manga scene, I feel as though 5 episodes, you could tell that story in 5 episodes. I think so. So, you know, I'm hesitantly optimistic. I'm not as... My fears are not completely relieved. You know, I still have some concerns. But on the whole, the bigger fears are sort of allayed, right? I'm hesitantly optimistic. I'm walking into this very hesitantly optimistic. I'm also walking into this as a butler serving the League of Villains, because this arc will make you love them. I was never a huge fan of the League of Villains. Like, I enjoyed Toga. I liked Shigaraki just fine. Darby seemed cool. Twice seemed funny, and then Spinner and Mr. Compress were just sort of there, right? Like, I never really enjoyed the League that much. You know, I never had strong opinions either way. But I need to tell you that I'm walking into this very much on their side. Like, I very much enjoy the League of Villains. I think they're brilliant characters. And Shigaraki in particular is fascinating. His past is very lightly explored here. Very, very lightly. And I'm not even going to hint at anything to come. But I will say that his past is very lightly touched on here. And we see All For One, AFO, appear. And he says, like, a hero will show up. One of the heroes will take care of them. That's what those people said to you, right? What a crazy world this is, right? And he says this to Shigaraki, this child, you know, who was clearly shaken, right? Like, these events have sort of rattled him to some degree. And it's interesting to me to see this moment, as we don't really see All For One care for anything, you know? Like, All For One has never seemingly cared for anything other than power and himself. So to see him care, like, openly weep for Shigaraki, it's interesting, you know? Like, he cradles him and holds him and lets him know that it's going to be okay. And we see these sort of flashes of memories for Shigaraki, and then we see All For One and the Doctor bring in the remains of Shigaraki's family, which, you know, unpleasant. But yes, we see the hands, right? Now, we know that these hands, these are the ones that Shigaraki is always wearing, right? These are his hands. Those are the hands of his family. Those are quite literally his family. That is all that remained. That is disgusting. That is disgusting. And it's a monstrous thing to do to a child. Again, in the manga, Shigaraki's breakdown is a lot more intense. When he sees this, Shigaraki, obviously, he doesn't remember anything prior to meeting All For One, right? Like, he's still piecing that together. His memories are coming back in waves, right? Not even waves, flashes. Like a wave would imply that there's a big memory and then it goes away, and then a big memory and then it goes away. It's more flashes. He's seeing faces. He can't quite put together who is who. But this is where the Doctor first meets Shigaraki, and he sees this young boy just being destroyed inside and out by the weight of his own quirk. And Shigaraki now, as a 20-something, once again is reunited with the Doc, and the Doctor says, like, all right, Shigaraki, like, if I'm going to follow you, I need to know what you're all about. And Shigaraki basically wants destruction. Shigaraki wants to tear it all down, start fresh, screw everything, right? Like, Shigaraki wants to tear it down and wants to sit on the top of the heap, Shigaraki wants destruction. And that might seem like, oh, typical villain nonsense, but the way Horikoshi writes it, it makes sense. And it's intense, like destruction, the whole thing. However, he would also let his allies keep what they want. And this, to me, is very telling, right? This, to me, is very, very telling of who Shigaraki and the League are. Shigaraki cares about his friends. He genuinely does. He is the dark inverse of Deku, but in the same way Deku cares about his friends, Shigaraki cares about his friends. Right? Shigaraki cares for the League. They are his found family. He cares for Kurogiri. He wonders where he is. Like, he cares for him. He cares for Twice. He cares for Toga. He even cares for Darby, even though Darby's an asshole. And Twice, right? We see this with Twice. Twice panics when the Meta Liberation Army call and say that they have Garan, right? Like, he panics because Garan gave him a home, Now, I pronounce it Giran, but I've been hearing other Anitubers call him Garan, so I'm going to say Garan. But I will say this about Garan. Garan is okay. You all might know. Let's just get this out of the way. So you all know that I have that thing called a wump. I suppose it's a fetish. It's not so much. I like it on anime characters and video game characters. I don't like it on real people. Well, Dean Winchester. But wump, if you don't know, is where you enjoy seeing fictional people look a little bit beaten up. They look cooler, right? They just look more badass. They look more attractive when they're sort of beaten up. Giran looks great in the manga, and we don't really see it in the anime, but when he's beaten up and he's like fighting back and he's like in defiance despite being, horribly mutilated, well, his hands are, and his face is sort of beaten up. It's not puffy or anything. It's not like grotesque. He's just sort of, he's beaten up. He looks great. And I just, I don't really have a reason for bringing that up outside of just, I felt like it. But yeah, it's funny to note that, Twice panics. Twice is terrified by this, and the idea that his friend, his ally, is hurt, and he's lost out there. There's someone, this someone who cared for him is in danger. That makes Twice panic. And Mr. Compress says, "Since when did you get so hung up on friends?" And Twice says, because I'm an outcast, right? Essentially, the thing with the League of Villains is that they're all strays, right? They're all stray. To quote Bungo Stray Dogs, they're all stray dogs. They all are strays that found each other and formed their own pack. They're a found family. And so Twice panics, knowing Giran is gone. And the Meta Liberation Army knew that they would react this way. They know that there is an unspoken camaraderie between the League of Villains. They know that Twice cares. They know that Shigaraki cares, that Toga cares. Right? They know that these characters care deeply for one another, so it would be beneficial for them to capture their informant. It would be beneficial to capture Garan because he gets them all their stuff. Compress even points out that Garan is the one who gets them their equipment, who gets them their intel. So without them, they're sort of put at this huge disadvantage, And I just so enjoy the League's dynamic with each other. Seeing them go toe-to-toe for 2 months with Gigantomachia, running on 3 hours of sleep. Well, Shigaraki's running on 3 hours of sleep because Gigantomachia is going solely after Shigaraki because he senses his connection to All for One. you know? Whereas the others are sleeping in waves, right? Like they're sort of sleeping in shifts. And you see them sort of leave and come back and leave and come back. And it's funny because another element of the story that I just remembered they cut is the fact that you don't know the league's current status going into this. Like, you don't understand. When we start this arc, they are low on cash, like very low on cash. Like, they can't even afford cup noodle. They are so low on cash. And they're very low on morale because of it. They're not eating well. They're not sleeping well. They don't have a lot of money. They can't buy things. They can hardly afford new equipment. They're low on and so because of that, they're low on morale. There's not a lot of fight in them right now, right? So imagine going up toe-to-toe with Gigantomachia when you barely have the money to afford to eat, and you don't feel like fighting Gigantomachia. Like, you don't have that fire in your gut. You know, you're not feeling the same fire. You're not ready to take down the world the same way you were not but a few months ago. They're running low. You know, they're running on fumes at this point. So imagine running on fumes and then running into Gigantomachia and fighting him for 2 months. Like, that's huge. Without that nugget of intel, they're just sort of fighting, you know? It's interesting. These little things that get left out that don't seem big, but when you leave them out, you're sort of like, it takes away a certain perspective. It's not a big deal, but it is interesting. And it's the reason why they focus on Toga buying herself a coat, right? Because, first of all, my girl can buy whatever the high hell she wants. Okay, Toga is a queen, and you will see why. If you don't already know, because you should know by now that Toga is the best. But Toga buys herself a coat, and you know what? She should. She looks adorable. She looks great. Buy yourself whatever you want, right? Because the doc gives them some much-needed cash. And that's something that, like, if you don't know, then, like, it's just an interesting little tidbit, right? To me, that was sort of an important detail, is the fact that the gang is low on cash and low on morale. But the anime didn't really feel like bringing it up. They just sort of offhandedly say, like, oh, the doc gave them money and Toga bought herself a coat. Haha, isn't that cute? But in the manga, it's more that Toga buys herself a coat because they haven't had the option to get nice things in a while. So this is as actually a boost in their morale. You know, it's little things. But, you know, it's not just the League of Villains that we have to talk about. It's also the Meta Liberation Army themselves. They are actively, as I said earlier, they are actively hurting Guran, cutting his fingers off and leaving them at each spot the League has appeared in this recent year, right? Because this is when they've been showing up, is this year. So they're leaving these fingers, right, just dotted about in all the different scenes that they showed up in, right? At the Ground Zero, at the Yakuza estates, like just leaving these fingers all about, right? And people are finding them, and they're not sure who they're connected to, but the police are aware that, judging by the DNA, they are, in fact, from the same individual. And it's very clearly meant to send a message. So they've literally just been leaving fingers to send a message to the League of Villains. And the message is that the Meta Liberation Army is the one who will tear down society as it stands, to rebuild it into a world where people can use their quirks freely, instead of needing licenses to be heroes, instead of hiding their quirks or not using them in order to benefit society. People will be able to use their quirks as they see fit. That was what Destro wanted, and that's how Destro sees himself, as this sort of grand liberator of society. He sees himself as the one who will be supreme. And they essentially do this by forcing the League into this unwinnable fight, right? Like, look at it from the outside, right? So, if you're Shigaraki, you get a phone call. It tells you, hey, come to this city, and if you don't come to this city, I will tell the heroes where you are. And if you come to this city, I will send my 100,000 plus troops on top of your head. How do you win that fight? Either you go up against the top 10 heroes, pro heroes within the top 10. We're talking Endeavor, Mirko, Hawks, Crust, all these heroes, top tier level heroes within the top 10, on top of their heads. That's not good. That's not a winnable situation. That's bad. So Shigaraki, being the absolute legend that he is, in the biggest galaxy brain moment Shigaraki has had probably this entire show, Shigaraki goes, okay, let's think about it like this. They want us to go there. And if they don't, they're going to drop pro heroes on our heads. We will lose. right? Like, I don't feel like getting any of us dragged off to, like, not so much we will lose, but we will easily lose one of us. One of us will get pegged, and they will get brought into the, like, one of us is going to get sideswiped by edge shot or something. Edge shot is going to hit somebody, like, you know, then take them in, right? Like, no matter what, if you send that many heroes on top of the League of Villains, because they will send as many pro heroes as they can for that particular group, one of them is going to get hit, one of them is going to get tagged and hauled off to jail, and they're going to lose one of the friends. It's not worth it. So Shigaraki goes, okay, so the only other plan is to go face them head on, go straight to the city and face them head on. You know, all 100,000 of them. So, well, maybe not all 100,000 of them, but they don't know that, right? Like, because it's like, well, the 100,000 are across the country. You know, as we see, it's like they're across the country. They're not all in one city. But as far as Shigaraki knows, they very well might be all in one city. So, the deal is, okay, come to the city, and we'll crush you, right? So Shigaraki's like, okay, let me think. That's happening. And we're still fighting Gigantomachia. But the big fella's asleep right now. So that means that when he wakes up, he will come looking for us. And he will run right to that city. And he will stomp everything in the way. So why don't we just use Gigantomachia as a big spear and have him attack the Meta Liberation Army and take out our problem for us? 2 birds, 1 stone. The army takes out Gigantomachia, or Gigantomachia takes out them. Either way, who's ever left is going to be tired as hell, and the League will come in and swoop up the rest. Easy peasy lemon squeezy, right? Probably easier said than done, but we'll get into that next week. And there you have it, everyone. That is this week's video completed. I certainly hope you enjoyed. If you did, once again, be sure to hit that like button. It helps out tremendously. Hit the subscribe button if you would like to see more content from me, and ring the bell so that YouTube actually does its job. But before we go, I do, as always, want to give a huge thank you to my masters who help support this endeavor through Patreon or as a member of this channel by hitting the join button right beside the sub button or clicking the link to our Patreon page. Both are just a single $1 and help out this channel tremendously. So thank you once again for the continued support. I sincerely appreciate it. And with that said, that is it for me. I sincerely hope you have a lovely day. Go out and do everything you want to do, but hopefully, don't cause too much trouble. And before we go, as always, clean your room. It's filthy.